The Galactic Council didn't notice the human smiling. The chair was wrong, but that's the first thing I noticed when I walked into the hall. Not the size of the place, though it was massive. Not the 47 alien species sitting in a wide curved formation, each one from a civilization older than anything on Earth. Not even the constant hum of translation systems turning strange sounds into something I could understand. No, the first thing I noticed was that my chair didn't fit. Was too high for the desk. The desk was too far from the center. And clearly, no one had ever thought to fix that. My name is Daravos. I'm 31 years old. I grew up in a normal city in northern England. Nothing special. I studied political science at a university most people haven't heard of. Then I spent 6 years working in interplanetary resource law, and then one day the government called me. They didn't make it dramatic, they didn't build it up, they just said, "You've been selected as Earth's first ambassador to the Galactic Council." Like they were offering me a desk job. Later, I found out the truth that I wasn't the first choice. Or the second. Or the third. The first candidate declined. The second had a medical emergency. The third stopped answering calls and didn't leave his apartment for 2 weeks. By the time they got to me, the deadline was 4 days away. I said yes before they finished the sentence. That was 6 weeks ago. And now I was standing in a room that had been running for 4,000 years, trying to adjust a chair that didn't fit. The hall was enormous. It was carved from a dark material that didn't reflect light. It swallowed it. The walls curved upwards so high they disappeared into clouds. Actual clouds, and I'm not exaggerating. There was weather inside the ceiling. This place wasn't built for humans. It was built for species that were taller, wider, completely different. One of them, the Veth, sat across the chamber. They were 3 to 4 meters tall, with 4 arms, built like gravity had always been heavier where they came from. Another species, the Orin, looked like pale insects. They spoke by vibrating their wings, and my translator turned it into a dry whisper in my ear. There were 47 species in total. I had memorized all of them. Their names, their planets, their politics, their alliances, their conflicts. I had memorized the entire council charter too, all 10,000 pages. I did it in one night. Not because I'm special, because I knew one thing. If I was walking into a room where everyone had a 1,000-year head start, I needed to be ready to, no one noticed. Not really. The Veth ambassador, the one who helped bring Earth into the council, barely looked at me. He didn't care. Earth wasn't important. We were just convenient. They needed one more vote to break a deadlock. We were the fastest option. They brought us in. Quick vote. Minimal discussion. Most of them assumed we wouldn't last, that we were temporary, that this would fix itself, and my seat was at the very edge of the chamber. The farthest point from the center. The worst position in the room. They gave me an outdated translation device too. Slight delay. Dropped words sometimes. Apology. Just handed it over like it didn't matter. I put it in and said nothing. The session started. 12 items on the agenda. That I already knew 11 of them. The last one had been added. That morning. A territorial adjustment. A small one. But I understood it better than most of the room. Still, I didn't speak. I just watched, listened, waited. Somewhere in the second hour, I felt something strange. Not fear, not pressure, not even that overwhelming feeling of being completely out of place. It was something quieter. It took me a moment to understand. It was possibility. Because when I looked around that room, I didn't just see power. I saw patterns, old patterns, rigid ones. I saw alliances that existed because they always had. Not because they still worked. I saw rivals who had argued for so long they stopped listening to each other. I saw smaller worlds sitting quietly, ignored, voting on decisions they had no real influence over. I saw a system that hadn't changed in thousands of years. And then I looked at myself. Wrong chair, bad seat, outdated tools, expectations, attention, pressure. And that's when it clicked. Nobody was watching me. Nobody cared what I did. Nobody expected anything from me. I looked down at the council charter on my datapad. 10,000 pages they handed me like it didn't matter. And I felt something shift inside me, like a lock opening. I smiled. Across the room, a vote was happening. Voices layered over each other. Translation systems humming. Ancient civilizations doing what they had always done. In '01 noticed the human smiling. And that was exactly what I needed. 3 months, that's how long I stayed silent. In speeches and bold statements. Nothing that anyone would remember. This drove my government contact completely insane. His name was Oliver Burke, senior official. Very serious. Very focused on appearances. He called me every 72 hours. Exactly. From a relay station just inside the edge of the solar system. Any progress? He'd ask. What he meant was, have you said something important yet? By the ninth call, he stopped pretending. You need to be visible, he said. I am visible, I replied. I'm in every session. That's not the same thing, he said. Voting with the majority every time isn't a strategy. It is for now. I told him that he didn't like that, but he wasn't in the room that I was in. So I kept doing what I've been doing. Watching. Not passively. There's a difference between being quiet and paying attention. Most people don't know it, that I was tracking everything. Every vote. Every hesitation. Every conversation that wasn't meant to be heard. And more importantly, every relationship. Because on the surface, everything in that room looked stable. Underneath, it wasn't. The Veth and the Solon had a trade agreement. Publicly, it looked strong. Privately, it wasn't. Twice in the last decade, the Solon had adjusted shipping routes. Small changes. Technical. Easy to ignore if you weren't looking closely. But those changes gave them an advantage at the Veth's expense. The Veth knew. The Solon knew that the Veth knew. And still, no one said anything. Because addressing it openly would cost too much politically. They kept pretending everything was fine. That kind of tension, it holds systems together and breaks them. Then there was the Oran Confederacy, 0.7 small species sharing one council seat. They had been united for 800 years, but now there were cracks. 0.2 of the 7 had been in a quiet dispute for over 60 years. Not open conflict, just friction. You could see it in the way their representative voted, a slight pause before certain decisions, that a few abstentions that didn't quite match their official position. Small details, but patterns always matter. And then there were the Oran elders, respected by everyone, trusted by no one. They had a reputation. Whenever they helped resolve a negotiation, both sides would leave feeling like they got slightly less than they should have, and '01 could prove it. But everyone felt it. That matters. That I wrote everything down. Not digitally. Not on any system. On paper, a simple notebook with a pen in handwriting that would take effort for anyone else to read. Because some information should never exist in a place that can be accessed easily. That was the first thing I was doing, watching, learning, mapping the room. The second thing, I was making friends, not with the ambassadors, with everyone else. The station was called Nexus, and it was enormous. Bigger than any city I'd ever seen. That IT had been expanded so many times over centuries that no one fully understood its original design anymore. That IT housed everything. The council chambers, diplomatic offices, thousands of staff, translators, engineers, maintenance workers, people the ambassadors never spoke to. I spoke to all of them. There was Priya. She worked in the document archives. She'd been there 9 years. She knew which records were original and which ones had been quietly edited over time. There was Cal, that he handled translation systems. He could tell you exactly which ambassador had upgraded equipment and which ones were using standard issue, which meant he knew who wanted faster information than everyone else. And then there was Set. Set wasn't human. Hadn't been for a very long time. Worked in the stations. Administrative core for 40 years. Communicated through patterns of light. Through my translator, it sounded like a calm, patient professor. Set knew everything. Not officially, but practically. None of these people were invited to official events, and '01 asked their opinions, and '01 paid attention to them. When someone finally did, they talked. And I listened. That I learned things that were never written in any report. Which votes had already been decided before discussions even began. Which ambassador had financial ties they weren't declaring. Which deals were already in motion. Weeks before they appeared on any agenda, I learned that the Veth were quietly influencing smaller worlds ahead of a major vote. Point one that wouldn't happen for 2 months. That I wrote all of it down. Carefully, quietly. And then, in the 3rd month, something changed. I was in the archive with Priya. She was organizing old documents. Routine work. The kind no one rushes. She showed me a set of original council records, old, important, but mostly ignored, because they were considered history. Not relevant anymore that I read them anyway, because I read everything, and that's when I found it. Not dramatic, in a warning that in a moment where everything suddenly felt important that IT was just there, buried in an appendix, inside an amendment. Passed over 4,000 years ago. A clause, simple in structure, complicated in impact, that IT said. Any world admitted to the council on a probationary basis that completes 3 full council cycles without breaking any procedural rules can claim full membership rights, retroactively 0.3 cycles, about 3 years. Earth had been in the council for 11 months that I hadn't broken a single rule, point one more month, and I could rewrite the past that I read it again. Slowly, carefully. Then I read it a third time that IT was real, still active, never removed, never used. Because no one had bothered to read this far. I looked at Priya. She was still working, didn't notice that I wrote down the clause number. Close the file. Thanked her and walked out. The corridors of Nexus felt different that day. Longer, quieter. 0.3 years of retroactive voting power. That meant reopening decisions. Old ones, important ones, agreements that had been made before Earth joined. Agreements that had already shaped the future, including one very important detail. The space around Earth's future expansion path had already been divided, given to the 5 largest powers that in '01 told us, because we weren't there. Now, I thought about the rulebook they gave me on my first day. 10, 000 pages. Like it didn't matter. I thought about my chair. .myc.m, why broken earpiece, and I smiled again. Back in my quarters, I didn't waste time, but I sat down and started writing. Not in my notebook this time. This had to be official, precise, careful, unbreakable. That I drafted the invocation in formal council language. Every word mattered. Every sentence had to survive attack. That I wrote it once. Then again. Then a third time. Each version cleaner than the last. When I was done, I saved it, closed the file, and went to sleep. The next morning, everything looked normal. Same hall, same seat, same broken earpiece. That I sat down exactly where I always did, listened, said nothing. But this time, I knew. The session that changed everything was supposed to be routine. The Outer Arm Resource Compact had been in development for 8 months. That IT was a massive agreement. 0.5 major powers working together, dividing control of an entire region of space. They called it open resource territory. It wasn't open. IT meant those 5 powers would control everything there for the next 200 years. And some of those systems were right next to where humanity would expand. Not inside our path, but close enough that it wouldn't matter if this passed. We would grow into a future already controlled by someone else. That in O access, in O leverage, in O voice. This had all been arranged before Earth joined. And for 2 months, I said nothing about it. I just prepared. The session started. 12 items. The compact was number 3. Items 1 and 2 passed quickly. Routine. Expected. Then item 3 was called. Counselor Breath of the Veth stood to present. His voice was calm, steady, like the outcome was already decided. He explained the agreement, cited the documents, outlined the benefits. Then he formally called for ratification. The Solon ambassador supported it. Standard procedure. A few smaller worlds raised soft objections. Nothing serious. Nothing that would change anything. Everyone knew how this would end. The floor opened for final statements. And for the first time in 3 months, I moved. I pressed the request indicator on my desk. There was a pause, and no one expected it. The administrator acknowledged me. Mildly, like this would take a few seconds. I stood. Ambassador Voss of Earth, I said, I have a procedural matter to raise before this vote proceeds. That got attention. Breath looked at me. For the first time in weeks, that a few others turned as well. Curious. Not concerned. Not yet. I kept going. Under Article 7 of the Council Charter, specifically the supplementary amendment to the Foundational Compact, Clause 9, Appendix 3, I paused just enough. The clause of foundational equity. Now the room was quiet. I am formally invoking Earth's right to full retroactive membership. Silence. Not empty silence. Thinking silence. The kind where very intelligent people all realize something at the same time. Wait, did she just Earth has completed 3 full council cycles without a single procedural violation? I continued. Our rights are therefore retroactive to the date of admission. Then I submitted the document. Across the chamber, I saw Priya. Just for a second, she gave a small nod. The T was confirmed. Real, valid, and now public. The room didn't explode. Not loudly. The council doesn't shout. It shifted. Fast. Voices everywhere, low. Urgent. Controlled. Translation systems struggling to keep up. Private conversations starting instantly. Breath didn't move, but I watched his hands, flat against the desk. Tense. The Solon ambassador lost that faint smile they always had, for the first time. The chief legal arbiter requested a recess that IT was granted immediately. The session stopped. Everything moved to review. For 4 hours, the entire council focused on one question. Was I right? I sat alone in a waiting room, drinking something that almost tasted like tea, and waited. Oliver called 17 minutes and that I didn't answer. That I sent one message. Invoked foundational clause. In review. He replied instantly. Questions, many that I flipped my device over. Ignored it. When the council returned, everything felt different. Counselor Orr stood at the center, calm, professional, and said exactly what I already knew. The clause is valid. Earth's retroactive rights are confirmed. The room went still again. This time, heavier. I stood up. Thank you, I said, and then I continued. Based on this status, I am requesting procedural review of 3 prior agreements. I listed them: trade routes, territorial boundaries, resource allocations, all decisions made before Earth was present. Then I added one more thing. I am filing a formal objection to the Outer Arm Resource Compact. That changed everything, because under council law, that meant delay 90 days, no vote, and no approval, no progress. The entire agreement paused. Breath didn't react. Not visibly, but I saw it again, his hand, tighter this time. Across the room, smaller world were reacting. Fast point one of them, the Taville representative, looked at me differently. Not surprised, not confused. Something else. Like something had finally shifted. The session ended. I walked out alone. The corridors were louder now, faster, filled with urgency. But none of it was directed at me. That in 01 stopped me. In 01 spoke. That I turned into a quiet hallway. Leaned against the wall. And for 30 seconds, I just breathed. Then I stood up, adjusted my jacket, and kept walking. Behind me, a system that hadn't changed in 4,000 years had just been disrupted. And this time, everyone would notice. I expected a reaction that I did not expect it to come from 3 directions at once. And I definitely didn't expect how fast it would happen. Everything hit within 48 hours. That told me something important. They'd already thought about this. Not me specifically, not a human, but the possibility somewhere at some point they had planned for someone to try this move, and they had a response ready. The first response was legal. That a joint challenge was filed. Veth, Solon, Durac, Assembly Point 3 Major Powers Point 1. Argument, I shouldn't be allowed to do what I just did. They used technical language, complex references, old precedents that IT looked strong that IT wasn't, because I had already seen it coming. That I had read those same sections, understood those same loopholes. And the night before the session, I had written my counterarguments. All 3 of them, clean, precise, ready. That I filed them within 6 hours. That in no delay, in no hesitation. That mattered, because speed signals confidence, and confidence changes how people respond. Second response was political. The Veth didn't come to me. They went to Earth. That a message, careful, polite, but very clear. That IT said, your ambassador may have gone too far, and it would be wise to reconsider her position. And no threats. They didn't need to threaten. The meaning was obvious. Oliver called me within hours. His voice was calm. Too calm. They're suggesting we recall you, he said. They're suggesting you consider recalling me. I replied, that's different. Pause. You're pushing too hard, he said. If we pull back now, I said, we lose everything. No argument. No objection. And no delay. The compact passes. Nothing changes. And we prove something worse. Another pause. That pressure works on us. Silence. They're very powerful, Oliver said. I know, I said. That's why I prepared before I moved. Another pause. What does that mean? It means I can hold this position. Trust me, for 30 days. Long silence. You have 20, he said. That was enough. The third response was different that IT didn't come through official channels. Set found me. Lower levels of the station. Maintenance corridor, quiet, almost empty. Set's light pulses slowed. Careful. There is a development, the translator said. That I listened that a name came up. The Shriven Syndicate. Not a company. Not an organization. A network. They solve problems. Quietly. Cleanly. No records. No mistakes. No witnesses. And I was now considered a problem. That I went back to my quarters slowly, sat down. And for the first time since I arrived, I let myself feel it. Fear, not panic, not chaos. Sharp, focused, the kind that clears your mind instead of clouding it. Everything unnecessary disappears. Only what matters stays. That it's not courage, that it's clarity. And I had prepared for this because humans have always done this. Smaller groups against larger ones. People inside systems built to ignore them. Finding the angle, the weakness, the one detail no one thought mattered. That we are not the strongest, not the oldest, not the most powerful. But we're very good at thinking ahead. 3 moves ahead. When others expect one. That night, I reviewed 3 files. Not weapons. Leverage. That there's a difference. A weapon forces action. Leverage creates choice. The first file was on breath. Nothing illegal. Nothing dramatic. Just a pattern. Quiet lobbying activity. Not against council law, but against a code his own government had publicly agreed to. If exposed, it would damage him severely, possibly cost him his position, and weaken his entire power base. The second file was on the Solon ambassador. Financial ties. Not illegal, but a conflict of interest. Votes he had made that directly benefited those connections. If reviewed, those decisions could be challenged, and the Solon cared deeply about their reputation. That would hurt. The third file was on the Durac representative. Internal politics, hidden communications. Not against council rules, but dangerous inside his own system. If revealed, it could destabilize his entire position. None of this broke the system, but all of it could shift it. I requested private meetings. All 3 within 48 hours. Breath agreed first, and we met in a neutral room. He sat calmly. Controlled. Prepared. Was I placed my datapad on the table, face down, and I spoke and threats, just facts. What I knew, what I could do, what I would do, and what I wouldn't. I told him clearly. I don't want to destroy anything. I want a different outcome. Point 1, where Earth isn't pushed out of its own future. Listen, didn't interrupt, didn't react. When I finished, he was silent. Then he asked, "How long have you been building this?" "Since my 2nd week." I said, pause. "Were you ever uncertain?" I thought about it. The chair, the calls, the silence, the way no one even remembered my name. "Yes," I said, "constantly." He studied me for a moment, then said, "I will make 3 calls." That was enough. Within 36 hours, the syndicate contract was gone. Within a week, the legal attack weakened, the pressure reduced, the other meetings followed. Not friendly, not easy, but effective. By the end of 2 weeks, all 3 had shifted from opposition to something else. Watchful, neutral. That was all I needed. Oliver called again. Day 18. The pressure stopped. He said, confused. Good, I said. What did you do? I had conversations. Pause, then softer. Are you all right? First time he asked that, I looked out into space. Dark silence still. Yes, I said, I am. And I was, not because it was over, but because now I understood the board, and I was already thinking about the next move. 90 days, that's how long the review period lasted. That I in galactic politics, that's a lifetime. Or just enough time to change everything. Most people expected me to keep fighting the 5 major powers directly, push harder, argue louder. I didn't. I turned around and started talking to everyone else. There were 48 member worlds in the council. 5 of them held most of the power. The other 43, they had learned something over generations. The system wasn't built for them. They adapted, stayed, quiet, watched, waited. I had been sitting with them. I in the outer ring. That I understood that position. I started there. The first was the Taville representative. Counselor in that we met in a small garden on the station. That a controlled environment filled with plants from different worlds. peaceful, neutral, that I didn't speak in general ideas, that I was specific, the compact, the agreements. What I planned to change, what was possible if the right people moved together. She listened carefully. Then she asked the only question that mattered. What do you want from us? Your voice, I said. Not your vote. Not yet. Just your presence in the conversation. She studied me. Why should we risk our relationship with the Veth? Fair question, because that relationship, I said, has been costing you more than it gives you. You know it. They know you know it. Nothing has changed because no one offered you a better option. That I paused. I'm offering one. Silence. Then I added one more thing. I'm not asking you to fight anyone. I'm asking you to sit at a table. That mattered. She agreed. Over the next 2 weeks, I had the same conversation again and again. Different worlds, same pattern, the Asari ocean-based civilization. Their system sat right next to the extraction zones. The Drovan Union, 0.3 worlds, 0.40 years trying to gain influence. Never quite enough. The Pelion, brilliant engineers. Underpaid for decades because they had no negotiating power when their deal was made. Each one had something, a frustration, a need, a gap. And for the first time, someone was. Listening, I didn't overpromise, didn't pretend this was easy. I told them exactly what this was. A coalition. Not powerful individually, but together, enough. Point one by one. They agreed. Not to fight, the TOs sit together. The major powers noticed that, of course they did. They always do. Breath sent me a message, carefully worded. Indirect. What are you building? I answered the same way. Something that works for everyone. If everyone is willing. That he didn't reply immediately. When he did, it wasn't hostile. The IT was cautious. That meant we were close. That I in week 6. I made the next move. That I didn't reject the compact. That I rewrote it. That's important. People resist destruction. They negotiate with improvement. The core structure stayed. The 5 powers kept access, but smaller, balanced. That I added oversight. Rotating seats. Worlds near the extraction zones would have a voice. That I added a protected corridor. Near Earth's expansion path. Not blocking development, but forcing consultation. That changes everything. And then I added something bigger. A new position. The developing world's seat. Any world that joined the council in the last 100 years could hold it. Rotating every 10 years. Not for Earth, for everyone. Permanent change. Structural, that's what made it work. The negotiations were long. Difficult. At the tea times, they almost broke. Breath pushed hard. The Solon tried something else. They went around me. Private offers. Quiet deals. 0.2 worlds accepted. I expected that I built for that I didn't need all of them. That I needed enough. And I still had enough. Day 87th, the agreement was ready. Not perfect, but real. The vote passed. The compact were written. That I was still sitting in the same seat. Still too far from the center. Still slightly uncomfortable. Still using the same flawed earpiece. None of that had changed because it never mattered. The session ended slowly. People talking, processing, realizing what just happened. That I gathered my things, started to leave. Then I heard my name. That I turned. The Orin Elder. Counselor Air Point, one of the oldest beings in the council. He walked toward me slowly. I have a question, he said. Of course, I replied. I noticed something. Pause. On your first day, you smiled. And today, you smiled again. And in between, many times. He looked at me carefully. I have never seen a new member do that. What does it mean? I thought about it. The chair, the silence, the assumptions. Everything. When I arrived, I said I had nothing. No power. No allies. No expectations. No one watching me. Pause. On Earth, we've been in that position many times. Smaller. Weaker. Behind. And we learned something. He waited. When no one expects anything from you, you're free. No one tracks your moves. No one prepares for you. You can read the rulebook they gave you as a joke and find the one clause no one noticed. You can talk to the people no one listens to. You can build something where no one is looking. He was quiet. And the smiling, he asked. That I smiled again. That's the best part. There's a kind of joy in being underestimated. Not to prove people wrong, but because you see opportunities they can't. Doors they don't realize are unlocked. He studied me, then nodded. We will not underestimate your world again. I know, I said. That's fine. I already got what I needed. He left out. I stood there for a moment. The hall was almost empty, clouds still drifting high above 4,000 years of history, slightly changed, back on Earth. No one knew that no one would. Not yet, just a normal day, while somewhere far away, a woman in the wrong chair had rewritten part of the future that I thought about everything. Not victory, not relief, something quieter, more lasting that I walked in with nothing. And walked out with reopened agreements. A protected future. A new seat for worlds like mine. And a coalition that didn't exist before. Not bad. For the species with the wrong chair. I turned off the lights in my section. Walked out. The council was louder now, more active, more aware. People were paying attention. Finally, and somewhere behind me, 47 civilizations were learning something new. Pay attention to the human in the room. I smiled all the way home.